The forest was quiet, too quiet for a night like this. A red mist rolled low across the ground, curling between the ancient trees like something alive. Wolves howled in the distance, not the kind that ran on four legs, but the kind that stood on two, stronger and smarter. Something was wrong in the air. The moon was full and blood-red. Ronan, a tall werewolf with scars on his arms and shoulders, moved quickly through the trees. His breathing was heavy, not from fear, but from what he was carrying in his arms. A girl with snow-pale skin and long black hair, dressed in torn silks and a tight corset that pressed harshly against her ribs. She wasn't human. She was a vampire. Her eyes fluttered open, shining silver in the moonlight. She looked up at him, weak and struggling. Her lips parted slightly, and her voice came out like a whisper of wind. I can't breathe." Ronan stopped. He set her down gently beside the base of an old stone ruin, a fallen chapel covered in moss and vines. He looked at her carefully. Her skin was cold, but not lifeless. There was something glowing just under the surface, like hidden fire. She gasped again, clutching her chest. "Please, the dress, the binding, it's cursed." Ronan's eyes narrowed. He had seen many tricks in his time. Vampires were masters of illusion. But her pain looked real. She didn't try to bite. She didn't scream or fight. She looked scared. He knelt beside her and took a deep breath. "Hold still," he said. With strong but careful hands, he began to undo the tight laces of the cursed corset. The silver threading burned slightly at his fingers, blessed threads designed to trap her powers and punish her body. As he loosened the last strap, she cried out, not in pain, but in release. A wave of dark energy rushed out of her chest like a whisper in the air. Her body trembled and then calmed. Ronan looked down. Beneath the gown, her skin was marked with black thorn-like patterns, cursed magic that wrapped around her like chains. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly. She opened her eyes again. "My own kind. I was born different. They'd feared it." Ronan stood up, his jaw tight. This was no ordinary vampire. There was a secret here, something bigger than both of them. And now, by saving her, he had crossed a line. Far in the distance, horns echoed through the night. Someone was coming. He looked down at her again. "You'll have to trust me," he said. "I'd already do," she whispered. He lifted her gently again, and together they disappeared into the red mist. That night, something ancient was set in motion. Something neither vampire nor werewolf could stop. Not now. Not anymore. The sky turned darker as Ronan moved through the forest with the vampire girl in his arms. The red mist was fading, but danger still hung in the air. He could feel it in his bones. They were being hunted. He reached an old cave near the edge of the valley, hidden behind thick vines and stones. No one from the vampire court or werewolf clans would think to look there. It was a place forgotten by time. He laid her gently on a bed of moss and lit a small fire to warm the air. The girl was still weak, but her breathing had returned to normal. She opened her eyes slowly. "Thank you," she said softly. Ronan nodded, still watching her carefully. "You didn't tell me your name." "Seraphine," she said. "Seraphine Valcroix." He froze. That name was known across the lands. Valcroix was the royal family of vampires, ruthless, powerful, and feared. If she was truly a Valcroix, then she wasn't just any vampire. She was royalty. "You're the daughter of Queen Isolde?" he asked, his voice sharp. She nodded slowly. "I was, but I'm not welcome in the court anymore. They tried to silence me. I carry something they fear." Ronan stood and walked a few steps away, his hands clenched into fists. He remembered that name well. Queen Isolde had ordered the execution of his family years ago. His father, a respected werewolf lord, had tried to make peace between their kinds, but the queen saw him as a threat. Ronan had been just a child when he saw the flames. He turned back to her. "Why should I trust you?" Seraphine looked at him with sad, tired eyes. "Because I didn't choose who I was born to. just like you didn't." Silence filled the cave. Only the crackle of fire could be heard. After a moment, Roman sighed and sat beside her. He didn't want to feel sympathy. But he'd seen the pain on her face, the fear in her voice. She wasn't lying. "I'm not the enemy," she said. "I want to stop this war. I want to break the curse they placed on me." "What curse?" Seraphine turned her face to the firelight. "They feared I would rise against them. So they bound my powers. If I try to fight back, it will kill me." Ronan stared at the flames. "Helping you could start another war. They'll come after both of us." She reached out, placing a cold hand on his. "Then we fight together." Something inside Ronan shifted. His hatred hadn't left, but something stronger was growing. A strange connection, buried deep. He had met her before, long ago. A glimpse of a memory came, a silver-eyed girl near a white tree. He didn't know what the future held, but for now he would not leave her side. Outside the cave, the wind howled, and the hunt began. The wind outside howled like a warning. Inside the cave, the fire burned low, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. Seraphine rested on one side, still weak but awake. Ronan sat across from her, sharpening a blade with calm focus. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of thoughts, memories, and unspoken questions. Seraphine watched the sparks from the fire rise into the darkness above. "This place," she whispered, "feels familiar." Ronan glanced at her. "You've been here before?" She shook her head slowly. "Not this cave, but the feeling. It reminds me of something I lost." Ronan stopped sharpening and looked at her fully. "Memories?" "Yes," she said. "They erased some of them when they cursed me, to make me forget what I once believed and who I once cared for." He leaned back against the cold wall. "Why would they do that?" "Because truth is dangerous," she replied, "especially when it lives in the heart." The fire crackled again. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Seraphine looked up, her silver eyes focused on his face. "I know you." Ronan didn't move. "In my dreams," she continued, voice soft. "Since I was a child. A boy with golden eyes, always standing near a white tree. I never saw his face clearly. But I think it was you." Ronan's jaw tightened. "I remember the tree," he said quietly. "It was in the neutral lands, the place where peace talks once happened." "I was there," she whispered, eyes widening. "My mother took me. I wasn't supposed to leave the tent, but I ran to the tree. And I was a servant boy," Roman said, "bringing water to the tables. You asked for a flower from the tree. I kissed you," she said with a soft laugh, her voice full of wonder. "Didn't I?" "You did," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "And the guards pulled you away. I never saw you again." For a while, the cave felt warmer. Their eyes met across the fire, and something shifted. Not just memory, but something stronger. A bond broken by time, sealed by pain, and now awakening again. Seraphine touched the markings on her chest. "They tried to take that moment from me, but it stayed." Ronan reached across the space between them and gently placed his hand over hers. "Some memories never die. They sleep, waiting for the right time to wake." They sat like that for a long time, two souls, once strangers, now tied by something deeper than history. The fire dimmed, but the warmth between them grew. Outside, the first snow began to fall, covering the forest in silence. And deep in the woods, eyes watched the cave, hunters sent to drag her back. But inside, Seraphine and Ronan had begun to remember not just each other, but the purpose that destiny had long kept hidden. The days grew colder. Snow fell heavier each morning. The cave had kept them safe for a while, but safety couldn't last forever. Seraphine's strength had returned, but so had something else, her thirst. She tried to hide it at first. She drank water, ate fruit, even crushed herbs between her teeth to keep her senses calm. But none of it helped. The hunger inside her grew, sharp and painful like fire beneath her skin. Ronan noticed. Her hands trembled when she reached for things. Her eyes turned darker, and her voice grew faint. You need to feed, he said one evening, watching her closely as she stared at the fire without blinking. She shook her head. I won't. I made an oath never to feed from someone I care about. Feeding can bind a vampire's soul to the one they take from. I was warned. It can never be undone. Ronan knelt in front of her, eyes firm. You'll die if you don't. I'd rather risk it than hurt you, she whispered. He reached for her hand. You won't hurt me. I trust you. And I'm not afraid of a bond. She looked at him, fear and longing written all over her face. Why would you risk that? Because you're not just a vampire to me anymore. You're something more. And if this hunger is the price of your life, I'll pay it. Her fangs were already showing. She backed away, shaking her head, but her body was failing her. Seraphine, he said gently, drink. Tears welled in her eyes. If I do, everything might change. Then let it change. She hesitated no longer. With great care, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his wrist. Her fangs pierced his skin and his blood flowed, warm, alive, full of strength. She drank only what she needed, and as soon as she stopped, she pulled away and fell back, breathing hard. But something strange happened. She didn't feel like a monster. Instead, she felt clearer, stronger. Visions swirled behind her eyes. Not dreams, memories. Secrets locked deep inside her mind. Her mother's voice echoed. If you ever find him, if your bond is real, you'll awaken a power that no court, no war can control. Her eyes flew open. She saw Ronan, his breathing fast, but steady. A glow surrounded him, faint but real. Her blood had touched something in him too. Their connection was not just a bond. It was a key. Suddenly, the wind outside screamed. Arrows struck the ground near the cave's entrance. Voices shouted in the distance. The vampire court had found them. Ronan rose, eyes glowing bright gold, fangs bared, claws ready. Seraphine stood beside him, her hunger gone, her fear burned away. They came to take me, she said. Then let them try, Ronan growled. And together, they stepped into the storm, no longer hunted and hiding, but ready to fight as one. The snowstorm had passed, but the cold stayed. Ronan and Seraphine crossed the frozen valley, heading toward the ice cathedral, a place of old peace, hidden deep in the mountains. It was a temple built from stone and crystal, where no war was allowed, and both vampires and werewolves once came to seek healing or truth. Seraphine shivered as they approached. Do you think they'll help us? Ronan looked at the towering gates, now cracked and weathered with time. If any place still honors the old rules, it's this one. But stay alert. Trust is a rare thing now. Inside the cathedral, silence reigned. Tall windows let in the pale light of dawn. Statues of winged wolves and robed vampires stood side by side, covered in frost. It felt like a place time had forgotten. A group of night priests welcomed them, hooded figures who bowed to no crown, only to peace. They led Seraphine to a resting chamber and gave Ronan food and shelter. For a moment, it felt safe. But peace does not last when betrayal waits in shadow. That night, as Seraphine rested, Ronan heard a familiar voice echo through the halls. He followed the sound until he reached a side chamber lit by blue fire. There, leaning against a column, stood Lucien Valcroix, Seraphine's cousin and commander of the vampire court guard. Lucien smiled coldly. Still playing the hero, Wolf? It doesn't suit you. Ronan tensed. What are you doing here? Lucien stepped closer. Making an offer. I don't want to kill you. I just want her. Give Seraphine to me, and I'll make sure you walk out alive. You'll be free. Even your pack, those who remain, will be safe. Ronan's fists clenched. You mean the pack your army destroyed? Lucien raised an eyebrow. They were in the way, like you are now. A long silence followed. Then Ronan answered, not with words, but with fury. He lunged. The fight was fast and brutal. Claws against swords, speed against shadow. The chamber shook with each strike. Lucien was strong, but Ronan was stronger now. His connection with Seraphine had awakened something inside him, power deeper than rage. With a final roar, Ronan threw Lucian across the chamber. The vampire crashed into a pillar and collapsed. But the battle had awakened others. Cries echoed through the cathedral. Flames broke out, stone cracked. The old rules were broken. Seraphine ran toward the noise, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw Ronan bleeding, her heart screamed. Her magic surged, bursting from her hands like silver fire. The priests fled. The ice cathedral began to fall. Ronan stumbled to her side. "We have to go. Now." Seraphine nodded, her face pale with worry. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," he said. "But neither will we." Together, they ran through the falling temple, past the ruins of old peace, into the night once more. Behind them, the halls of ice melted into ruin. Ahead, their destiny waited, darker, deeper, and more dangerous than ever before. Ronan and Seraphine traveled deep into the wild mountains, far from any road or map. Snow turned to rain, and the trees grew thick and silent around them. After days of running, they found shelter in an old hunter's cabin, wooden, broken in places, but enough to keep out the storm. Inside, Seraphine lit a fire with a flick of her fingers. Her magic was stronger now. The hunger that once weakened her was gone, replaced with steady power. Ronan watched her from across the room as he cleaned his wounds, still sore from the fight with Lucian. Neither spoke at first. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, the only sound was the fire's soft crackle and the wind pressing against the wooden walls. Seraphine broke the silence. "Why did you protect me? Even after knowing who I am? After what my family did to yours?" Ronan didn't look at her. He sat on a wooden bench, staring into the fire. "Because I saw something in you. A girl who didn't ask for this war. A soul trying to do the right thing, even when it's hard." She moved closer, her voice low. "They told me werewolves were monsters, that you only knew how to destroy." He gave a small smile. "They told me vampires had no hearts, that you couldn't feel anything but hunger." They looked at each other. Both had grown up with lies, but now truth stood between them, stronger than blood, older than fear. Seraphine sat beside him. "What happens now? We can't run forever." Ronan looked down at his hands, rough and scarred. "No, we can't. But maybe we don't have to run. Maybe we fight not just for ourselves, but for something better." She studied his face. "A new kingdom?" He nodded. "One where bloodlines don't decide your worth. Where peace isn't just a word in old books." A quiet moment passed. Then Seraphine placed her hand over his. "If we do this, we do it together." He turned to her, his voice steady. "Together." As the storm outside raged, something inside the cabin grew warmer, gentler. A soft glow filled the space as their hands stayed joined. They didn't need words. In that silence, a promise was made. A pact, not just of alliance, but of heart and soul. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about purpose, change, hope. Seraphine rested her head on Roman's shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because she wasn't facing it alone. That night, the rain washed the world clean outside. And inside that little cabin, something new was born. A bond neither vampire nor werewolf had ever shared before. Far away, in dark towers and cold caves, their enemies stirred. They could sense it. Something powerful had awakened. And it would not be stopped. The snow had melted by the time Ronan and Seraphine came down from the mountains. Spring winds swept across the land, but peace did not return. Word of their survival had spread. Whispers turned into fear. The vampire lords and werewolf generals, once enemies, had joined forces, united not by peace, but by fear of what Ronan and Seraphine represented. A vampire and a werewolf standing together. A bond stronger than blood. A love neither kingdom could control. At the edge of the ruined borderlands, the couple stood on a high ridge, looking down at the valley below. Smoke rose in the distance. Troops were gathering. The ground shook with the sound of war drums. "They're preparing to strike," Ronan said, voice low. Seraphine's eyes glowed silver. "They'd fear us." "They should," he replied. But deep inside, he wasn't thinking of revenge. He was thinking of the vision Seraphine shared with him, of a land free from old hatred, where children were born not into war, but into peace. They rode down into the valley, not with swords drawn, but with banners high. At the heart of the valley stood an old meeting hall once used by both races long ago. There, Seraphine called out to the armies that surrounded them. Her voice rang clear and strong. "I am Seraphine Valcroix, daughter of the vampire throne," she shouted. "But I do not speak for them. I speak for a future where power does not come from fear." Ronan stood beside her. "And I am Ronan, son of the wolf lord they burned. I speak for the packs who lost their homes to lies and greed." Their words were brave, but the response was not silence. It was violence. A wave of arrows flew from the vampire ranks. Silver blades flashed from the werewolf side. The ground shook with the charge of war. Ronan stepped in front of Seraphine, but before the arrows reached them, she raised her hands. Her magic rose like a storm, silver and white, wrapping them both in a shield of light. The air cracked like thunder. Suddenly, her magic merged with Ronan's power. His roar echoed across the field. His body glowed with ancient energy, something no wolf had ever held before. The bond between them had unlocked it. He transformed, but not as a beast, as something new, a guardian of both bloodlines, a symbol of unity standing taller and stronger than ever before. The armies stopped. For the first time in centuries, silence returned to the battlefield. Seraphine stepped forward. "We've not asked for your loyalty," she said. "Only your choice. Follow hatred or follow hope." The generals hesitated. The soldiers whispered. Something was changing. And in that moment, as Ronan stood shining beneath the full moon and Seraphine's voice carried across the winds, they saw what had been hidden for too long. This was not the end. It was the beginning. 1 year had passed since the final battle in the valley. The war that had lasted for generations between vampires and werewolves had ended, not with fire or death, but with a choice. Some chose to walk away from the old ways, others still held on to fear. But enough had changed to begin a new age. At the top of a high hill stood a stone castle built from both dark marble and warm oak, half from the earth of the wolves, half from the stones of vampire halls. It was called Dawnspire, a symbol of unity. Inside its great hall, Seraphine stood by a wide window, holding a sleeping baby in her arms. The child had dark hair like hers and golden eyes like Ronan's. His breath was soft, peaceful. He was the firstborn of both bloodlines, a child born of war and love. Ronan entered the room, his armor set aside. He walked quietly to her side and looked down at the child. "He smiled in his sleep," Seraphine said with a soft laugh. "I think he dreams of flying." Ronan placed a gentle hand on the baby's head. "Then let him dream. He'll grow in a world better than ours." "Because of what we did," Seraphine whispered. Ronan nodded. "Because of what we survived." Outside, the moon rose full and red, the blood moon. It had once been a sign of fear, war, and death. But tonight, it was a sign of hope. On the castle walls, both werewolf and vampire guards stood side by side, watching the lands they now protected together. Children from both worlds trained in the same school, hunted in the same woods, and learned not fear, but friendship. Still, not everyone had accepted the change. Far in the cold north, hidden in black mountains, old leaders planned in silence. They whispered of revenge, of taking back what they believed was theirs. But they were few now, and the world had already begun to move forward without them. Inside Dawnspire, Ronan turned to Seraphine. "Do you remember the first time you saw me? Really saw me?" She smiled. "In the cave when I was broken and cursed?" "No," he said, wrapping his arm around her. "Before that, at the white tree, you kissed me." She laughed quietly, and I got in trouble for it. "It was worth it," he said, leaning his forehead against hers. They stood together as the moonlight wrapped around them, the baby safe in their arms. In their eyes there was no fear, only peace and the promise of a better world. The wind outside carried whispers of old songs, tales of a vampire girl who found breath not in magic, but in trust, and of a werewolf who didn't run from her touch, but held her heart. Together, they had ended the war. Together, they had started something new. And beneath the blood moon, a new story had just begun.